did undergo psychotherapy, but I haven't found a video where you actually were talking in depth about it. So why did you go to psychotherapy, and especially how did it improve your relationships back then? Can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, you're assuming that it improved my relationship back then. I would say not so much did it improve my relationships.
How so?
In fact, basically, it was a giant neutron bomb over all living things in my vicinity. Well, I mean, this is obviously something I can go into more detail, so I'll just give you sort of a brief outline here. My therapist was a woman, and she was not the first one I went to, but she's the first one I stayed with. And I went for, I think, a little over 2 years. For the majority of that, I went for 3 hours a week. Plus, I did at least 10 to 14 hours of journaling. I was not in a relationship at the time, and a romantic relationship. And I went because I couldn't sleep. I went because I couldn't sleep. There was nothing particularly dramatic that happened, but I just stopped being able to sleep. And if you've never been through insomnia, count yourself an extremely fortunate human being. It can't kill you, but it can make you wish you were dead. And when everybody usually has occasional times where they can't sleep. So I chalked it up to, work is tough, entrepreneur, something's going on, whatever, right? And then I remember I had a sore throat, so I took some Neocitran and I slept. And I'm like, oh, okay, good, well, it's passed. And then I couldn't sleep the next night. Just out of curiosity, tried Neocitran again, put me out, couldn't sleep. Couldn't sleep, went to see a doctor, got some valerian root, couldn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. I've actually, everything I did in therapy and all my journals I actually have typed up in book format with footnotes so I could remember everything that went on. Goes on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, all my dreams, all the conversations, all the interactions. One day, perhaps, it shall see the light of day, but I was living with a woman at the time, and the relationship was, of course, in hindsight, doomed, but I didn't know that at the time. In hindsight, I couldn't sleep because I was walking through my life. Because I was responding, not initiating. Which sounds odd, I've written books, I was an entrepreneur, got myself well educated and all that, but fundamentally, I was not living my values. My philosophy, or philosophy itself, had precious little effect on my relationships. This is why I say to people, when you bring philosophy to your relationships, I said this from the very beginning of the show, you bring philosophy to your relationships, not many will survive. But those that do will actually be real relationships. So, my girlfriend was seeing a therapist, and I said, I can't sleep. I've got to talk to someone. And she talked to her therapist, and her therapist, knew that I was artistic and intellectual and philosophical and all that, and intelligent. So she recommended this woman that I went to go and see, and I went to go and see her. And I vividly remember our opening conversation. And I've mentioned this on the show before, but I drove to the appointment. Parked my car. I couldn't find it. Parked my car. This is before GPS. Parked my car. Finally, and got this. I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. I've been circling this whole neighborhood like a shark in the water, trying to find." And she's like, "Wow, I guess that would make me the kill." It's a very, very violent image. Not bad. It just really struck me as a very violent image. Have a seat. Let's talk about it. I'm like, well. When you're very intelligent, it's hard to find people interesting. But she was interesting. The major effect of therapy for me was that I recognized the value of my inner life. I recognized how essential it was for me to listen to my instincts, to be deeply rooted in myself, to listen to my dreams, to listen to my impulses, to examine the little whiskers of feeling that tickle through our spines from time to time that we often just shrug off and ignore because they're so ridiculously inconvenient to our circumstances. Right? The phone rings. Oh, I hope it's not this person. You say, oh, well, I'm sure I'm just, being inattentive, or, then you put on your dutiful mask and you have the conversation with whoever you don't particularly want to have the conversation with. And you go through this little shrinking, dying robot of conformity dance till your batteries fall out and you just can't put one more goddamn metal foot in front of the other. And I couldn't sleep because I was dying. I was surrounded by people who were selfish and corrupt and were corrupting me. And my soul was like a sapling in the shade. It was simply wilting, expiring. It was not being fed by the energy of consistent values and integrity. And through the process of having somebody interested in me, I paid for it, but she was genuinely interested and would ask me questions and would ask me to tell her more. And I would bring in a dream, and sometimes we would spend the whole week on that dream, unpacking it. She took my inner life incredibly seriously. I had a dream that I was lost in a maze, fleeing a skinless woman, who was my mother, who was chasing me through these catacombs. And I opened a door, and I almost squished a little boy behind a door. And I told her about the little boy, and I said, he really reminded me of me. And she leaned right forward and stared at me so intently. And she said, did the boy in the dream have legs? And she was so focused on that question. It incredibly mattered to her whether the boy had legs or not. I don't want to get into all the reasons why, but it was so striking to me that it absolutely, completely, and totally mattered to her whether a boy I almost squished with the door while fleeing from a skinless woman, whether that boy had legs. In the dream, she was leaning forward like someone about to pronounce a diagnosis of life or death. Did the boy have legs? In other words, was he a ghost? Was he floating? Was he dead? Or was he standing? It mattered what my inner life was. It mattered what my instincts were. I had an eruption of characters within me. I can still remember all of their names. There was a crusty old son of a bitch named Lord Gruel. There was a gentle maternal woman named Maman, which is a French for mother. A whole host of characters. All erupted in me. I would have endless conversations, the most incredible conversations with these characters. And they fought like fuck my intellectualization, my abstractions, my dissociation, through cramming syllables together like I'm playing some unholy tune on an accordion from hell. They fought my abstraction, and they drove me like an iron spike into a railway tie. They drove my consciousness back down into my body. My body, you see, was the instrument of my torture when I was a child. They cannot torture your abstractions. They cannot spank or hit or starve your concepts, but they use your body to harm you. Your nerves, your sensations, your feelings, your preferences, your desires, your loves, your wants. They use those against you. And so your body, when you're abused as a child, becomes your enemy. It becomes that which is used to hurt you. And so you must eject from your body, to reuse the metaphor, like a fighter pilot out of a burning jet. You must go up into the sky and eject from your body called dissociation to survive the torture that your body inflicts on you through the hands of your torturers. Returning to my body, to the boy with legs, returning to what I thought was a burning airplane, was the hardest thing until last year that I've ever had to do. It is like going to embrace a corpse, which is not a corpse because you're willing to embrace it. And this amazing woman respected my intelligence, respected my capacity for language, respected my sensitivity, and just kept driving through it to pass through the abstractions to connect to the real history, which lies in the body, in the flesh, in the nerves, in the sensations. And when I connected with my history, when I connected, and this sounds like it's a moment, it's not. There's this fantasy that in therapy, you have this goodwill hunting meltdown and you cry and you scream and you kick and then all is better. No. If you are repairing an abandoned house, there's not one moment where it becomes livable. It slowly transitions into something you can live in through work and sweat and gruel and slivers and falls and roofs breaking and repairing it. You slowly repair and make something beautiful that was ruined and abandoned. And through that process of rehabilitating the haunted house of my history and turning it into a warm and living space, through that process of re-inhabiting myself, my history, my body, of reclaiming my nerves and turning them back to the service of my happiness rather than the sadism of my abusers, through that process, I became myself and lost almost everyone. Because when I became interested in myself, because somebody was interested in me, when I recognized how much value I had within myself for myself, I recognized that I had to pay a stranger for years to do what my supposed friends and family should have been doing for decades. You know, when you pay a prostitute for sex, it can really help remind you that your wife isn't giving it to you. And that process of connecting with myself detached me from others. Well, it didn't detach me from others. It woke me up to the fact that there was no attachment to others.
Well, that sounds pretty unexpected. So what you're telling me is by connecting with your inner self, gaining self-knowledge, you lost everyone in your life. You must have felt pretty lonely.
No, it's more like it's not that, again, it's my experience at the time was of loss, but the loss had occurred from the moment of meeting onwards. There was never anything gained.
Right, yeah.
Right, so it felt like I was losing something, but all I was losing was an illusion. Right, let's say I think, oh, I'm going to go and audition for American Idol and win.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's say I end up not going to American Idol. Would I have won? I would not have won. I mean, you listen to the winners belt out a song. Holy crap. I mean, people can really sing.